Hello and welcome to The Rewriters, a celebration of people who have shirked convention, expectation, and even their own limitation to rewrite their story on their terms. Each episode will dig into the inspired and very real-life stories of people who have done just that, rewritten their story. I'm a nosy practical optimist too, so expect all of the nitty-gritty details. If you're an ambitious seeker craving a different kind of lifestyle, career, or business, but have felt held back by your own or other people's beliefs about what's possible or permissible, The Rewriters is for you. Hello and welcome to today's episode. I've got a pretty special one for you today, and it's a topic that's quite personal to me. It's about alcohol, and more specifically, how for some of us, myself included, our relationship with alcohol can or has held us back and gotten in the way of what we really want from our life. I'm joined in this conversation by Izzy McLean, a transformational coach and the founder of The Whole of the Moon, and she works with women to help them make the changes that they want to see in their lives. And one of her key programs is dedicated specifically to women wanting a more positive relationship with alcohol. Izzy says she spent the first 4 decades letting life happen to her until she woke up and personal circumstances conspired to make her realize that she alone was responsible for making the most out of her one life. And this deceptively simple realization, she said, has continued to have a profound effect on the way that she lives, the way that she loves, and the way that she works. Driven by her desire to understand and get a handle on her own relationship with alcohol, she spent many years studying the science and practice of behaviour change before training as a transformational coach and resigning from her leadership position in education to start her own coaching practice. Now she's on a mission to share what she learnt and to help other women make those changes that they want to see in their lives too. During this conversation, Izzy and I share the reasons why we each decided to reassess our own relationships with alcohol and where we're at in our own journeys. Now, neither Izzy or I would have described ourselves as big problem drinkers, but the point was it just wasn't working for us anymore. And for many people, not knowing where we fit in the is it a problem or isn't it a problem spectrum can really hold us back. So this episode was created for anyone who has a niggle that it just might not be working for them. I really want you to know that you're not alone. And if it's not working for you, that is enough of a reason to reassess. It really doesn't matter what anyone else thinks or what anyone else does. I also want to underline a point that neither myself or Izzy are trained in addiction therapies, and this conversation is not a substitute for addiction care or support. So please don't treat this as expert advice. It's simply two women sharing their stories in the hope that it will provide some comfort for anyone who might need it. Now, if you would like to find out more about Izzy's fantastic work or to join one of her programs, I will link to all of those in the show notes. And if you'd like to connect with me, the best way to do that is by signing up to my newsletter, The Weekly Rewrite. It's out each Wednesday, and in it I share tools, insights, and stories to help you create a work life that you love. It's also the first place to get the latest episodes of the Rewriters podcast too. If you enjoy this episode, please do let me know by sharing it on social media, #TheRewritersPod. I'm at @the_rewriters on Instagram. Give it a 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. And please share this episode with anyone you know who might need to hear it. Okay, on with the episode. Izzy, welcome to The Rewriters.
Thank you, Monique. I am so excited to be here because, as you know, I'm a huge fan of your amazing podcast.
Oh, thank you. And I am so excited, A, to have you here, but B, to be talking about this topic. This is a topic that I haven't spoken about so openly before. And it's something that is really important to me, clearly really important to you, but I think really powerful for a lot of people potentially as well. So I'm going to dive straight in. But before we do, I just wanted to ask you if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself to the listeners the way that you like to be introduced.
Okay, I'm Izzy McLean. I am a life coach and a mental fitness coach. And I feel really passionate about helping people get to a place where they're able to live their very best life. And I know that sounds so cheesy, but kind of don't want to make an apology for it, because I feel that for me, although I made some very good decisions and had a wonderful life up until the age of 40, I largely sleepwalked through it. And it was only in my 40s that I really woke up to intentional living. And I just want to be shouting it from the rooftops, what a difference it makes. And I think part of the waking up process was, strangely enough, part of the thing that at the time was such a source of pain, which was my relationship with alcohol.
Yeah, I can relate to that. And that's what brought us together. I mean, we met virtually because we met sort of mid-pandemic, but we both trained as transformational coaches at the same coaching training school. And we met on a group coaching CPD. And I think we sort of vibed with each other in the breakout groups and kept in touch. But I didn't appreciate at the time that you had this backstory around your relationship with alcohol, and a lot of the work that you were doing as a coach was to work with women to help them navigate their relationship with alcohol too. And it wasn't until probably a month ago, maybe even more recently than that, that you shared an article on LinkedIn that you had written about your relationship called, I think I'm remembering this correctly, Alcohol and Me.
Yeah, me and my frenemy.
Me and my frenemy, yeah.
Yeah.
And when I saw that, I gasped, sort of, oh, I can't believe it. Amazing. Because I have recently gone alcohol free, and I'll share a little bit more about that as we go through our conversation. But really, we're here to talk about you. But when I saw that, it just really struck me. I didn't know that was part of your story. It's a part of my story as well. And certainly when I started digging in to find resources and literature and to feel, I suppose, find my identity in seeing other people navigate it as well, a whole world opened up that I hadn't really understood, grey area drinking being one of them. And I just thought, this is a conversation that's really important to me. And I think this is something that we could be talking about more openly. And people are talking about it openly in spaces. If you dig that, it's there. But I really wanted to bring this into my platform and to my podcast as well, because it is a big part of my story too. So can you take us back to the beginning? So start wherever you want to start, but I'd really like to understand the kind of genesis of you reaching this point that you wanted to make a change, and maybe to give us a little bit of color or context to what led you there. So where were you? What change did you make, and what did you experience after that?
Yeah, that's a great place to start, Monique. I think the first thing that I need to say is that there is no dramatic rock bottom for me. And I feel really fortunate in that. I feel really fortunate that I woke up before there was a dramatic rock bottom, because I may well have been heading that way. But and one of the reasons why I'm so grateful to be invited on here is I think that rock bottom stories and celebrities really struggling, and a lot of the quit lit, I think you call it, don't you, literature out there is often centered around a big rock bottom story, a big drama, or one of those real alarm bells, like drinking in the day or that kind of thing, or drinking in the morning and or losing everything. And none of that happened for me. And I just feel really passionate about giving the message that you don't need a rock bottom to get to a stage where, if something isn't working in your life, why have it in your life? And so for me, there was an increasing period in my kind of late 30s, early 40s, where after children, I'd had my babies, I'd happily stopped drinking when they were little, and all those sort of really hard early motherhood years. And then it became the kind of new social vibrancy of meeting new people around school and new mums and all that kind of stuff. And just increasingly, I noticed that my drinking wasn't working for me. So I wasn't always drinking more than everybody else, but often I felt like I was. And, the waking up in the early hours just filled with call it pistanoia, you know, that feeling of just total paranoia.
Hang on a minute, what? Pistanoia?
Pistanoia.
I've
Yeah.
never heard that. I've heard of anxiety.
Yeah, basically sort of paranoia about what you've said and done when you've had too much to drink.
Yeah, been there.
Yeah, and nothing awful, just oversharing and maybe stumbling. But the biggest impact was on my mental health, on how I felt about myself the next day. Just really low, horrendous hangovers, filled with remorse and regret. And at the same time that this was happening, I'd also been put on a kind of self-development reading journey by a good friend who happens to be a coach. And the kind of link between what I was reading, and I guess the disconnect between what I was reading and what I was actually doing in my life, just became increasingly uncomfortable. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does. And actually, there's a point that you made that I really want to underline, because it's something that held me back for a long time. And I've heard it spoken by people that I really care about and like close friends. And they've said the same thing. And I think it's held them back too. And it's this binary that we create, that someone with a drinking problem or someone that needs to stop drinking or someone that's an alcoholic or whatever labels you want to attach, you know, they're a fall down drunk, or then there's the rest of the world. And actually, as I was thinking through this interview, I listed some of the things that held me back in making my decision to live alcohol free. And you've just given me a good segue to talk about them. One of them is the alcoholic. You know, I'm not an alcoholic, so, you know, it's not that bad. The other is the language that other people might use, like, oh, well, you weren't that bad. What's the problem? So other people's voices, other people's opinions about, you know, how good or bad you are or your drinking is, which also kind of leads to this comparison. You know, we kind of measure our drinking and how good or bad our drinking is compared to other people. Well, I'm not as bad as that person, so I don't really have a problem. I'm not a fall down drunk, so I don't really have a problem. There's no rock bottom, so what's the issue? Everybody else is doing it. And some of the other things, and this is more earlier on in my drinking career, I suppose, would be people pleasing, you know, fitting in, fear of missing out. It's very much built into the culture, or certainly the cultures, the work cultures and the social groups that I moved in. I've been guilty of, and this is a long time ago, but I've been guilty of saying, you know, don't trust someone who doesn't drink.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, because they're coherent, right? And it comes from a place of, certainly for me anyway, I would say that in my early 20s. I wouldn't have said that now as you know, in my early 40s, but it came from a place of, you know, probably embarrassment and internalized shame. And the other thing that stopped me was self-pity. You know, I have gone alcohol free before, but it was more begrudging. Like, well, why can't I just drink like a normal person? Why do I have to have, you know, that 1 or 2 glasses of wine too many? And then I have the anxiety or the what was the other thing you said?
Pistanoia.
Yeah. You know, it just kind of like, woe is me, self-pity about it. And now that I've gone alcohol free this time, I don't have any of that. Like, I've moved beyond that. And it sounds like this is one of the things I want to unpack with you, that what do I want? Who do I want to be? And what's getting in the way? And when you realize that one of those things might be alcohol, and you want the thing that you want on the other side more, that's when a big change can happen.
Yeah, you're so right. You're so right. And it's that truism that when we want change, we are either moving away from pain or we're moving towards pleasure. And if it can be both, if you can get really clear about why it isn't working, the pain point, and really clear about what it's holding you back from, then you've got both. You've got the push and the pull. But with just one or the other, it doesn't really work. You kind of need both. Well, I found I've needed both.
You didn't have the kind of rock bottom moment, but did you have like a moment of clarity? Did you, or was it more gradual or nuanced than that? Like, what was the shift for you going from, you know, drinking a few too many glasses of wine or having that anxiety to actually removing it from your life?
it was so many different stages of shift. And I think the time that I actually stopped for the first proper length of proper time was 2014. And the reason why I stopped in 2014 was because, and I stopped and started multiple times before that, over a sort of 4-year period beforehand. But in 2014, my favorite hangover cure, the way that I functioned, was to go to red hot yoga and sweat it out. And in 2014, I had a knee operation and I couldn't. The knee operation followed a lunchtime, fabulous boozy lunch with friends where I had just overdone it. I remember the shame I felt, because in that instance, because we'd been drinking at lunchtime and it had gone on to early evening, the girls had been around and they were old enough to be aware that I wasn't being normal mum, and they didn't like it. And I remember talking to my husband about it the next day, and just this huge, massive shame and self-hatred and all that kind of stuff. And then sitting on the sofa, and but there'd be nowhere to put this toxicity that I felt inside me, drove me to finally reach out to the kind of sober, positive sobriety movement. And I started blogging, and from then onwards, that was hugely powerful. But Monique, prior to that, the pain point for me actually began really when I started trying to control my drinking. When I went from just being completely oblivious and then gradually realizing actually this isn't working, and then trying to control it and moderate, I had about 2 miserable years of stopping and starting and trying to moderate and reading all this literature, which was kind of working, but not really rewiring my brain. And so that was what, does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, that is another point, the head space and the energy that is given to trying to moderate. I mean, through the pandemic, I had my alcohol-free days, and I drank actually within, unless I was having like a dinner with friends or, a barbecue or something like that, which, let's face it, didn't happen very often in the last 2 years or year and a half. But for the most part, I drank within NHS guidelines. I would probably work my way through a bottle of red wine through the week. For some people, it would be like, well, what's the big deal? Why are you quitting drinking if you're only drinking a bottle or so? For other people, that might be, wow, you got through a bottle of wine in a week. For others, they might get through a bottle of wine or 2 in a day. It's kind of irrelevant what the quantity is, because we're all different and what works for us is different. I think that sort of stuff is what we're talking about. It holds you back comparing to what someone else is having or not. But for me, the constant, okay, well, I'm not going to drink this night, this night, this night, this night. So I don't drink Sundays, Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, because I like to be available for clients on a Sunday. And Thursday, Friday, Saturday feels like an okay time. So then I had the 2 halves of the week, the days when I wasn't drinking and the days when I was. And Friday nights I could drink more because it was the end of the week and I didn't have a client the next. Just the constant, logistics, managing the logistics of it. It took up a lot of headspace.
Yeah, it's the drinking thinking, and it's exhausting. And the constant, I don't know about you, but the constant bargaining with myself, and and the whole, and people don't just do this about drink, we do it about food, we do it about exercise, anything which you're framing in that way of, you're allowed it and then you're not allowed it. And we're talking about an addictive substance here. I also want to say I'm not anti-alcohol. I'm not, my husband drinks like a fish. All my friends drink like fish. I'm not anti-alcohol. I'm just anti-alcohol for me. You're so right. Giving up the comparison thing is so important, because you can always find somebody who's more drunk than you, who's got a worse problem than you. And you can always find people who seem to be, it doesn't affect them at all, and ultimately it's just working out what suits you and trying to live your life in a way that supports your best you.
I'm 51 days alcohol free. So I'm very, very early in this journey, but this feels very different to times previously when I've gone alcohol free for a year before, and I hated every minute of it. I did it begrudgingly. I did it filled with, why can't I just moderate? I'll reset my relationship with alcohol, and then I'll drink again, and it'll just be moderate, and I'll just be a normal, I'll have a normal relationship with alcohol, be a normal drinker. That's a slippery slope back to it not working for me again. So I was talking to a friend really, really early on in this stage. We both have alcoholism in our families. And I said to her, actually, I think if I'm honest, my relationship with alcohol has always been high stakes. It's never been a low stakes relationship for me. And that was really predetermined. And I'm not talking about genetics. I'm talking about the fact that there's alcoholism in my family, and that carries with it some pain. There's a story, or lots of stories around that and around alcohol and the role that it played in our family's history that I have known my entire life. It was always going to be, for me personally, it was always going to be high stakes. It was never something that felt light and breezy. I remember when I was growing up, I had one friend who said to me, "Why do you have this Catholic guilt? Like, you've got this, you're not religious." Like, I didn't grow up in a religious home, really progressive house, really progressive mum. I had this Catholic guilt. And now that I look back, that's sort of 20 years ago, it was this, what I think I understand now to be cognitive dissonance, but this separation between who I felt I was and what I was here for versus how I was showing up and what I was doing. There was a real disconnect. And I've described it before as this pendulum between the two sort of halves of myself, or the multitudes of myself. And over time, that pendulum swing has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller as I integrate all of the different parts of me into one. And so that voice, that sort of intuition, if you want to call it that, was saying to me, you're not going to create all that it is you want to create until you stop drinking entirely. And the reducing my drinking down to, a bottle of wine a week and not going out every weekend and overdoing it was kind of not the point. It was kind of not the point at all. It was getting rid of it entirely for me.
Yeah, you've covered so many important points there. I mean, first of all, I love that framing of a high stakes relationship. I think that's so much more useful than the framing of normal or not normal drinker or alcoholic or any of those things. And secondly, you touched on the, what is it that causes some people to have a high stakes relationship with alcohol and some people not to? And I find that all fascinating. But the more I've read, the more I've realized there are no straightforward answers.
Yeah.
When it comes to why people become psychologically addicted or disordered drinking or whatever way you want to look at it. And as you say, ultimately, kind of it's not the point. The point is it a net benefit in your life or not? And for me, I've come to the conclusion it isn't. And I see a lot of people around me or hear a lot of people who feel that way too, but are, I think, held back from seeking help because we live in an alcohol-saturated society, and because a lot of us have grown up with the normal, natural way to be an adult and to have fun as an adult is to drink.
Yeah.
And it's scary to think that might not be your way of having fun. But I guess that's going on too. But then you also touched on it sounds to me like you have arrived at 100% positive decision and commitment. And therefore there is no discussion, there is no cognitive dissonance, there is no brain chatter. And when that goes away, it's such a bloody relief, isn't it? Because it's exhausting.
Yeah, it was, honestly, Izzy, for me, it was a moment of clarity. And I've said these words a million times before, and I'm sure other people have as well. Certainly, if you were drawn to this episode, you probably said this to yourself. The amount of times in my 20s I woke up and said, that's it, I'm never drinking again. This big sort of declaration. And of course, if that was a Friday, I'd be out the next night on a Saturday doing it all over again. But this time, I said to my husband, I'm not drinking again. And he went, okay, because he couldn't care less. His relationship with alcohol is low stakes. He does drink. Sometimes he drinks to excess. He's quite funny when he does. but his relationship with alcohol is pretty low stakes. You know, it doesn't take up a lot of headspace. He's not tracking alcohol free days or is he living in line, none of that stuff. He's just very transactional, matter of fact, can take it or leave it, doesn't care if I drink, doesn't care if I don't. But I sort of said to him, I'm not drinking again. And he went, okay. And I said, no, I really am not. And he went, okay. Yeah. And I didn't feel the need to sort of say it again, like to convince him, because it felt really light. Like it wasn't a heavy, regretful declaration. It was a knowing kind of deep in my bones that I was moving to the other side of that. And it felt very clarifying, very light. And I felt very sure and certain, but without the weightiness of forever. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. It makes total sense. And two things that come up for me from that. One is that, and I can't remember, I've read so much quick lit that I can't remember where I read it. Certainly not my thoughts, but the difference between 99% and 100% is huge. Because 99%, you've still got that little inkling of reasoning and rationalization with yourself and debate, but 100%, there is no more noise.
Yeah.
And that is a decision, isn't it? That's a decision. And that's huge. And then the other thing that came up for me is this, it has now left me. But yeah, no, it's about when you're totally in alignment with what you're doing. And for me, I guess there were 3 stages to my thinking about this, which are not new. They're just my journey, and everyone's journey is different. But at the beginning, it was that realization that mindset was everything, and that staying in a mindset of choice was everything. So this pity party you talk about, you know, it's like I've done, you know, many, many times of saying that's it, I've had enough now. And all the realizations of I'm not living my best life, all that kind of stuff, they were still there. But my approach was, woe is me, I can't, I'm not allowed to, you know, it's the way I'm wired, you know, real woe is me stuff. And then the shift, the reframing is so powerful, that NLP stuff of ownership and choice and all of that. I think that is absolutely key, getting and staying in a mindset of choice. And in my kind of early days of not drinking, of living alcohol free or embracing sobriety, however you want to put it, it was all about, I realized very soon that the work wasn't not pouring myself a glass of wine. The work was staying in a place of choice, because the moment I started to have a pity party was the moment that was where I was having to use self-control. And of course, you soon run out of self-control. But it does take work to stay in that mindset of choice, because we do live in a society, and I like you, I'm surrounded by people who have low stakes relationships with alcohol, who love alcohol, and therefore staying in no, I'm choosing not to do this rather than I can't, took work initially. In the early stage, that was the work.
Let me pause on that point. Let me pause on the mindset of choice piece for a minute, because I think this is an interesting one. You said that you had three stages that you went through, and the first one being mindset of, or staying in a mindset of choice. So I wonder to what extent that mindset of choice journey, for want of a less naff term, the kind of the when the drinking stops is kind of arbitrary, because for me, my mindset of choice, I am in a mindset of choice. I choose not to drink. In fact, I have a healthier relationship with alcohol now in my 40s than I did in my late teens, 20s, and probably 30s too. But that journey to the stopping drinking, I haven't actually had to have any additional work yet. Each day I'm sort of thinking about how I feel and am I having any sort of triggers to drink. It's been really, really easy for me. There haven't been cravings. There haven't been things that I've had to manage or navigate. In the very first week, there may have been, or second week, there may have been like a moment or two at 6 p.m. on a Thursday where it's like, oh, but it was just kind of habitual and easily overcome. It wasn't anything that required additional work. And the reason that I'm saying that is not to say, oh, look at me, I did it and I haven't had to do any work. But I think the work was happening before I stopped. I woke up that day and went, I'm not going to drink anymore. So that mindset of choice isn't something that starts post putting down the last drink, right?
No, I think you're right. I think it starts for people at different points. I think for me, getting to that mindset of choice took time and was impacted by what I was reading, etc. But also the fact that you, Monique, are a very self-aware person with high self-efficacy, who's done a lot of reading around personal development, all of that thinking will just be part of the very fiber of who you are. Whereas me 10 years ago, I wasn't there yet. You know, I hate God, how often do we have to use this journey metaphor? But it sort of works, doesn't it? But yeah, so, and again, I'm not saying work as in hard work, but things like when life events happen. So, you know, if for the first few months of that time when I was on the sofa and I started blogging, the work was the blogging. You know, it didn't feel like work. It felt like the biggest joy ever that I was writing about this stuff and people were reading it and I was reading their blogs and it was so supportive and we were all in the same place and everybody was feeling the same things and it was amazing. It was such a supportive community. It was fantastic. So because I love writing anyway, that just felt like a joy. That didn't feel like work. But it was when things happened from the small things, such as it's Christmas and what we do at Christmas is we have a glass of delicious champagne. And there's no hangover within that one glass of champagne. There's no pain necessarily. But again, still going, no, I'm choosing to not, you know, and because I am freer, I'm better off without it. So there's language around that. But then I lost my dad in a very sudden and dramatic and horrendous car accident, which left my mum crippled and really badly injured and in intensive care, and keeping my choice not to drink around that was huge for me, really, really huge. And I remember this dear friend who had listened to me bang on about alcohol for about 5 years. And I remember ringing her up and she had lost her daughter a few years before to cancer. So she knew about grief. And I remember ringing her up and asking her two things, one of which was just ridiculous. Well, both of which were ridiculous. One of which was, what are the stages of grief? Because I want to know what stage I'm at now because it doesn't feel good and I want to know how long it's going to last for. And of course, that's a ludicrous question. But anyway. And the other question was, I want to drink. I want to open my mouth and pour a bottle of red wine down my throat so I can just numb this pain. Why can't I drink? Tell me what to do. And her saying to me, Izzy, the answer is in you. You know the answer. And it was just the words I needed to hear. I needed someone to say to me, you. It's not that you're not drinking because it's better for your children. It's not that you're not drinking because you'll be a more supportive sibling or you'll be there for your mum or any of that stuff. It was about me.
And that puts you in your power. It's empowering. It's taking you out of the why can't I, you know, pity party. And I mean, I have not experienced that kind of grief, but I can imagine it is pain that is so visceral that you desperately need an anesthetic. And, you know, red wine is a great anesthetic. It's a bandage or band-aid. Certainly it just makes the wound worse when you peel the band-aid off. But what great advice to get at that time to just put you back in your position of power.
Yeah. And, you know, when sometimes people just have the words, don't they? And I'm so grateful when they do, because I don't even know if she realized how powerful those words were and why I needed those words, but I really did. And then it wasn't, you know, for me, it wasn't like that was then the job done. So I didn't drink for the whole of that year. And then after that, I occasionally dabbled
Mm-hmm.
And very occasionally I still do, very occasionally, increasingly rarely. And when I do, maybe even just one glass. So it's not that alcohol remains a problem for me. It really, really doesn't. It's just that knowing that every time I do drink, or if I was to continue to drink, it starts voting against the identity that feels very powerful and strong to me, and that now works for me.
When you were talking before about this sort of continuum of mindset of choice, and I described the pendulum swing and then integrating all of the different bits of myself, the reason that it's become very clean and simple and easy is because it's very much in line with who I see myself as, how I see my life, what I value, what I prioritize, how I want to spend my days, what's most important to me. That all is supported and reinforced and uplifted by removing alcohol from my life. I just don't have to waste any time thinking about if I will be tired, or if I will feel 100%, or if I'm having an alcohol-free day, or whatever. It's all lining up for me now, who I think I am, how I see myself, how I see my life, and how I actually am living all aspects of my life. It all fits together and makes sense. I'm not out. I don't even really like to say out of alignment, because I think it's one of those sort of, turns of phrase that sounds a bit naff and can kind of turn people up a bit. But for want of, again, a better phrase, like I feel aligned, like I'm in integrity with who I am and how I want to live.
Yeah. Yeah, you're so right. And again, I think because of who you are and your profession, you are very aware of your purpose and your values and your strengths and living into all of that. And you're right, that was my second realization. The kind of baskets they fall into is, one is that the mindset of choice and the language. The second is it no longer being about alcohol, the alcohol being just a sideshow and becoming a tool, of one of many tools in my toolkit that enables me to live my best life, which again,
another turn of phrase we love. Journeys and living our best life and being in alignment.
So much easier if we were American, but there we go. But yeah, I mean, and once I kind of stumbled across the work of Simon Sinek and James Clear and all that stuff on your identity, your why being at the core of it, then it was just this whole other ease that came into it, because I wasn't having to work so hard mentally to stay in a mindset of choice around alcohol, because I was I was working with my identity. To give a little bit of context to this, I've always been driven by, I'm an RS teacher, by religious studies teacher by trade before this, and read theology at university. And the reason why I did all of that and loved my teaching career is because I was absolutely horrified when I realized that we're all going to die. And I wanted answers, I wanted to know, is there a God? And if so, what's he going to do about the fact we're all going to die? And I'm going to die? I mean, God, that's kind of been my philosophy, and the kind of search for meaning has been kind of my drive. And then in my 40s, it became less about what happens at the end of life and more about realizing, hang on a second, this is my one life, probably. And I really want to get the most out of it. And I want to find out what I'm supposed to be doing here and have an impact. So there is some real depth to that quest to live my best life. It's something that I've been struggling to find the answers to, or seeking for the answers to, forever. And what I've found so intellectually satisfying is that all these philosophers who I've held up, both Eastern and Western philosophy, as hugely intelligent, amazing individuals, their insights into the human condition are being borne out by the findings of neuroscience. There is proof that these incredibly wise people had it so right. There's now scientific proof through MRI scanning of our brains, etc. Forgotten why I started off on this.
Let me take you back. You were talking about identity. And at a high level, it sounds like your identity previously was a kind of, where are we heading to and what's the point? And am I going to die? And then it shifted to, let's park that for a minute, and actually what's going on for me right now, and how can I rather than worrying about what's the point of it all, what's the point of right now, and how can I get the best out of my present?
Absolutely. And living intentionally. And I guess focusing more on that, that, but I can't control whether there's anything beyond this life.
Yeah.
I don't believe I can know actually in this life whether there's anything beyond this life. I'm an optimistic agnostic, but there we go. But what I can do is maximize this life. And I absolutely love that Mary Oliver poem. Do you know the one where it ends with, tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? And that for me still kind of hits me here. And so then I started to dig into my strengths and my values. And, what a big one for me is love of learning. And another big one for me is love. Yeah. And I can't be this wisdom seeking, loving person when I'm filled with remorse and feeling rubbish and depressed and with eating my way out of a hangover. In order to be me, I am best off with alcohol free. So it becomes a tool, along with exercise, along with meditation, along with gratitude. They are all tools in my kit.
So one is mindset of choice.
Yeah.
Two is it's no longer about alcohol. Alcohol is not the lead character. It's a tool. You're the lead character, and living alcohol free is a tool of many. That starts to, using my language of stakes, that lowers the stakes. It kind of reduces its magnitude. It just becomes this, smaller thing. And so what's the third sort of big realization that you had?
Yeah, the third, I guess, is building your self-command muscle through mental fitness. So this particular system I use, and that's been so impactful for me, has been developed by Shehzad Shamin at Positive Intelligence. And it's this method of just basically engaging your self-command so that you can more easily, because we are all triggered. I still get triggered, whether it's to do with alcohol or whether it's to do with not exercising, whatever, but our monkey minds take us all over the place and triggers in all sorts of different places. And my particular form of self-sabotage is pleaser and perfectionist and all that kind of stuff. And in order to kind of engage my best self more frequently, you can build up the ability to do that and engage your self-command muscle.
What is self-command? I've not heard that term. I mean, I can, obviously intellectually I can understand what you mean by self-command, but in that context, what is the sort of definition of self-command or your self-command muscle?
Well, I guess it's kind of easy to define it about what it's not. So it's not self-control. So self-control for me is about fighting with what you want. It's a kind of a struggle. It's effortful. Whereas self-command is, I guess, being in your prefrontal cortex, mostly, being in that part of your brain, being driven by what you really want, by what you want, rather than you triggered in that moment who suddenly wants something that you actually don't want. So it's the you of the next day, or it's the you of 5 minutes later, once the blood has left your kind of limbic system and is gone back to your prefrontal. Do you know what? Does that make sense?
Higher, it's you in a state of your highest authority. It's almost like you as the leader rather than you as the manager.
Yes, that's exactly it. So that you take control over your brain rather than the strong emotion or feeling or thought that you're having, which shows up like with this sense of urgency, which shows up as truth. And because the blood's in that part of your brain, it feels like that way, but it actually isn't.
That's such an important point, and certainly not just in relationship with alcohol, but in all of our experiences. One of the things that I encourage my clients to do, and this is nothing new, this is what anybody working in the coaching and therapeutic space does, is to just pay attention, to just be aware, and to not believe that our thoughts are reality, that our inner critic, or it's been described as shitty committee, inner voice, whatever you want to call it, some people give it a name, they're not speaking truth, and your body's reaction is not necessarily, it could be reacting in a fight or flight response, trying to keep you safe from the tigers that may have come thousands of years ago. But just staying in that state of awareness and letting that moment pass, being the you of the 5 minutes later, post trigger, post craving, or post stimulus, and then moving forward, because it's usually just a couple of moments of paying attention is all you need.
That's exactly it. And that is all this is. It's just a system of building that attention muscle. And a really powerful way of doing that, because it is a muscle, and you can get better at it over time. So that has really, in the last year, and I say it's not, for me, that hasn't necessarily just been about alcohol. It's been about absolutely every area of my life, and the system has been developed for every area of life.
It's just interesting that kind of the layers of the mindset of choice, the no longer being about alcohol, and the building your self-command muscle, in that sort of those 3 realizations that you went through. And I'm sure there were more, and there was lots of subheaded realizations within that as well. But the alcohol gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. It just kind of disappears. Okay, so if you were speaking, so you work with women, helping them to improve their relationship with alcohol. What do you see in a lot of the women that are coming to work with you? What are some of the commonalities that you see that can hold them back from making that change?
A lot of comparison, a lot of both up and down.
Yeah.
A lot of
Sorry, fear. Can I pause you there? The comparison up and down. That's huge. That's huge. The comparison up being, well, I'm not as bad as that person, so I'm fine. The comparison down being, why can't I just drink like a normal person? Both of those, scenarios separating you from yourself and what's going on for you. That's fascinating. Comparing up and comparing down.
Yeah. And it's stuck in the trap is, I'm miserable drinking, but I'm miserable at the thought of not drinking. And I guess it's when, as I always say, I can't tell anybody what their end relationship with alcohol should be. Or, for some people, maybe they can reach a place of happy moderation. Maybe. And that moderation is going to look differently for different people. Maybe alcohol becomes so small in their picture that they can take it or leave it, which is largely what I can do now. I just choose to leave it because most of the time. But maybe it won't be. What I believe that I can give people is, or walk through with people, is that journey up the self-efficacy ownership ladder of, I can do something about this, and the ownership of the mindset of choice, but driven by purpose. And then the self-command stuff just helps bring you back to your purpose and to your mindset of choice when you're triggered. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And the thing there that I can relate to my own work and my context, my sphere, my area of interest is in the world of work and careers, and the role that careers play in our life, and how we can integrate, or we should integrate, our work and our careers into our whole life, rather than it being this separate thing that can detract from the quality of life outside of work, and so on and so forth. And certainly the relationship that I have with alcohol, and that relationship with my career, it's pretty intrinsically linked. If I'm thinking of, well, I won't have a client on that day because I've got the dinner the night before, there's a direct correlation between my glass of red wine or 2 and my client call 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning. I suppose the point that I think is really, really interesting across the work that you do and the work that I do is neither focuses on the endpoint. A lot of people come and work with me and they are fixated on, well, what should they change their careers to? What job should they do next? What should they choose to retrain in? Help me understand exactly what the endpoint's going to be. And actually, that's kind of irrelevant. Of course, it's important. It's important to future you, but that will all unfold as it is meant to. The most important thing is what's going on right now and kind of unpacking all of that stuff and reconnecting them to themselves, and also empowering them, getting them back into that sense of power. So the mindset of choice that you talk about with alcohol in the workplace, that can look like having some boundaries, choosing to prioritize the things that they need to feel well, whether that be exercise, more time with their family, more autonomy over their work. When they can get clear about that kind of stuff, and when they can get clear about the way that alcohol is showing up in their life and the way that they would like it to or not, the end point is kind of the least important aspect of that.
Yeah. And that's why, the whole day thing, the whole counting the days can be really helpful when it is a joyful, where you're at, a joyful, well done me. But it can be really unhelpful if a blip comes along.
Yeah.
And it's okay, what, am I back to the beginning now?
Yes.
That's really depressing, because I had, 80 days under my belt. I've got to go back to day one.
Yeah.
And again, that's where I think the whole, it's going to be different for different people, and it's so about the language that you use around these things.
I completely agree with you, because the counting thing I find interesting, because I agree with you. Life is a continuum, our experience is a continuum, and we don't go back to zero. The language of going back to zero is kind of uncomfortable for me too, and I don't even really know why I'm counting, because I do have this sense of, this is just how I live now. Is the number important? The way that it helps me, I think, because I was saying earlier in our conversation, it feels really easy for me. I hope I didn't sound glib when I said that, but it feels kind of easy, and I don't have to, do a lot of work around, this, that, or the other to fight cravings or whatever. I don't necessarily feel that I have those. However, upon saying that, if I'm really honest, well, I'm tracking every day. I'm making a commitment every day to live that day alcohol free. That is staying in my intention. It's setting that intention at the start of each day and wrapping that up at the end of each day. So that is an external marker of my commitment and success, if you want to use that language, but I probably think that's quite unhelpful. It's not really about that. And then the other thing is, going back to the point you were making about identity, I felt really supported and assured by a lot of the work that I was able to access, the writing that I was able to access. And while I didn't relate to a lot of it in terms of the rock bottom and the app that I follow, a lot of the people that are on there and sharing are really, really struggling to stay alcohol free. And my hat goes off to people that are able to share. I'm a massive lurker on these sorts of forums. I'm there, but I'm not sharing. I don't necessarily relate to their experience, but that's cool, because I'm having my experience and I feel like I'm a part of a broader community.
The counting days is a positive. If that's giving you a tick, it's fabulous. We all want ticks. I think ticks are great. Little happy smiley faces of well done us. It's only a negative when we use them as sticks to beat ourselves up with afterwards, which is what I did. So I would do however many days and then have a blip, and then be that blip, instead of being, oh great, a learning opportunity. I can learn from this. I would take that on board, and I would see it as a learning opportunity, but I would also see it as a failure. And failure is not, when you frame things as failure, that's not motivating. Well, it wasn't motivating for me. You sound like you're holding it lightly.
Holding it lightly is a really nice turn of phrase. And I think on that note, I kind of want to underline the point. I'm sharing this on my platform. I'm a transformational coach. I am not a therapist. I'm certainly not trained in alcohol recovery. This conversation is not professional advice on how you should or shouldn't navigate your relationship. It's just sharing. And I am able to navigate this with ease and lightly and hold it lightly now there have been times in my past when it would have felt really heavy, and I wouldn't have been able to hold it so lightly and navigate it with ease. And it is, as you alluded to before, it is the result of a lot of the work that I've been doing personally and professionally in the last 2 years as well.
Yeah, and thank you for raising that, because I also am not trained in addiction therapy. And my understanding is that if somebody is physically addicted to alcohol, they really need the support of their GP. I believe I can really help women who are not physically addicted, but still feel trapped in this, I'm unhappy when I do, and I'm unhappy when I don't.
So what would the first, this might be a really reductive question, but what would you say is the first thing that someone can ask themselves, or thing that someone could do if they find themselves listening to this and going, that sounds like me?
That's a really good question. And I don't think it's reductive, actually, because I think the first thing we all need, whether it's to do with our careers or anything in our life which is feeling uncomfortable, is to get clarity. And so I've developed a resource which is on my website, and people can just go and have a look. There's a written part, but there's also an audio that goes with it, which should help people get clarity on where they are on the kind of ownership ladder. Are they in denial and blame and excuses and waiting for it to go away? And if they are, fine. But what impact is that having on their wellness, their well-being, and their happiness, and their relationships, and their productivity? And just being really honest. Or are they a little bit further up the ownership ladder? Do they realize this isn't a positive in their lives, but they're unsure, they're at the solution seeking stage? Or are they actually really ready to take action? And again, whatever stage they're at, what impact that is having on their well-being, their relationships, and their productivity. So just getting real clarity on where they are to begin with.
Going back to that point, just stopping and seeing where you are. People are at the start of this. I think that there's a case for being quite private about it. Certainly in my experience in the past, when I've gone alcohol free, and more recently as well, when you share that you are alcohol free, it invites a plethora of commentary from other people who are telling you why they don't go alcohol free because they don't have a problem, or or are you really sure this is going to be is this sticking then? This isn't just something that, like, I've had comments. I mean, there haven't been lots of comments, and I don't know if that's just because of the nature of the world at the moment. I'm not in contact with as many people, and I'm not sharing as frequently that I'm not drinking. I'm not in social situations all the time where I'm not drinking, so it's not coming up as it once may have in the past. But I think that there is certainly something to be said for the impact that your decision to go alcohol free will have on other people, and the natural desire of other people to therefore share why they don't. I have seen a lot of that, and I've seen it again this time as well. And I think for me personally, because I'm treating it lightly and with ease, it's mostly been okay. But there's probably within that, the lightness and ease, there's still some work that I need to do, because there's deep-seated, right at the core of it, there's some deep-seated shame and regret for not doing it sooner, or, there's still some stuff that I'll need to unpack. And that is the kind of stuff that I would unpack with a therapist, or perhaps some just sort of self-reflection. But I'm able to navigate that involvement and insertion of other people and their stories quite comfortably, because I'm coming from a place of certainty and self-awareness and self-honesty. In the past, that would have been extremely triggering for me, because it would have automatically placed me in that place of comparison, comparing up or comparing down, which is disempowering and can make you feel embarrassed, shamed, judged, or maybe I'm not so bad, maybe I should just drink again, or oh, I am really bad, woe is me, how shameful. So I just wondered if you'd had experience with that, if your clients have had experience with that, and what your thoughts are in terms of the comments of others, the insertion of other people and their lack of a drinking problem or whatever it may be, and how is a safe way to navigate that in the early stages for yourself?
Yeah, I think there's so much what you said in there that I recognise. Yeah, I mean, I've been incredibly lucky. I've had really supportive friends, really supportive people around me, but also I think everyone was just relieved when I shut up about it, because I had years, because I'm very much kind of heart on my sleeve, and my years of drinking, thinking, and giving up and stopping and starting, and all that painful 2 or 3 years, everybody heard about it. When I finally sorted myself out, I think they were just like, oh my God, she stopped whinging. But yeah, in terms of other people, my clients have different experiences. I think it's very unique to everybody. So I guess knowing what works for you, but also knowing the people around you. So you're not going to have everybody greeting your decision with great joy, because there will be some people, probably it may be that there are people around you that are also struggling, that they haven't quite admitted it to themselves yet, and therefore they need to defend their position, and you might therefore be triggered and sabotaged. But they might not even be meaning to sabotage. It's not a conscious thing. You have to be careful that you're not inviting that into your life. Yeah. But I guess it's going to be so individual, isn't it? How much people are comfortable sharing, how much they're not, and who's around them.
So it goes back to just being aware, paying attention, holding yourself with real reverence and care.
Yeah. And as you say, the whole paying attention to the fact that what you're doing is the biggest act of self-love, to really look at what is serving you or not serving you in your life. And whether that's to do with alcohol or career or whatever it's to do with. And I'm now a big convert to self-love. As human beings, we are emotionally contagious. If we love ourselves and are filled with self-love and joy, that is the emotional contagion we give out to others. And it just grows and grows and grows. So the best thing you can do for yourself is a bit of self-love.
And it's the best thing you can do for others as well. I love that. Okay, we're coming to the end. I mean, I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours and hours. I'm sure we'll have many more conversations offline on this topic as well. I wanted to ask you, and I'm going to put you on the spot here. And I kind of apologize in advance, because I'm apologizing in advance, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Okay. I wanted to ask you if you could give some advice, guidance, reassurance to the Izzy who was in it all those years ago. What would you say to her now? Because there may be someone for whom they are feeling like you did at that point. Would you mind doing that?
No, that's a really beautiful question. Kind of makes me want to cry. But I think I would say to her what my friend said to me, is that the answer is in you. You have the key. You're standing in a room that you think is locked, but you've got the key.
Use that key. It's reminding me of a 90s song. You'll know it if you know it. Okay, well, have you got anything that you would like to, I'm going to link to your website and your program as well. All of the stuff that you do, I'm going to share links to that in the show notes. But is there anything in particular you would like to highlight or share?
I think we've covered masses. There are some free resources on my website, so go and have a look, and there's no obligation to jump in and do anything with me, but just go and see if they're helpful.
Well, thank you so much, Izzy. It's been such a joy chatting to you. I've often, during this conversation, I've forgotten that we're recording a podcast. It's just been a real joy to talk to you and to hear your story and to unpack mine as we go as well. And I hope that it has helped people. I'm sure that it has. And I really appreciate your honesty and your generosity.
Well, yours too, Monique. And thank you so much for inviting me on and for, being brave and sharing this, because there is no shame. Actually, that is my last point. There is no shame. And I would love to get a stage. Increasingly now we're talking about mental health openly. And there used to be all this shame attached to mental health. And there isn't now. Or increasingly that is becoming an easier thing. And I want to get to that stage with alcohol, where it's not cloaked in these dark shame fests. Actually, you're just trying to work out what works for you and what doesn't work for you.
Yes. Yeah. I 100% agree. The shame thing is one of the things that holds us back. And I would love to reach a point where we can talk, hold it lightly, hold it with ease. I think it would help a lot of people to move past and to heal.
Yeah. So thank you for this.
Oh, my pleasure. You take care. I'll speak to you soon. Bye.
Okay. Take care. Bye.
The Rewriters is produced, written and presented by Monique Shaw, original artwork by Kiana Perry, and original music by DJ Cinnamon.